If I was hunting a place that had a lot of dirt roads and easy to track, I would track out of the truck. Just get in the truck and drive, and find somewhere in that management area he's going to cross a road, and then I could backtrack him and kind of know where to look based off where he crossed that road. And now, even that's funny looking back now, where they crossed the road 20 years ago before we had maps. It's the same place they're crossing the road now, and it's on the topo line every single time. Before I was big buck hunting, but I'd backtracked him, and I found what he had done was made a rub line, and I come to find out he was doing it every 3 days. He was making a loop, but I found where his tracks crossed in like 3 places, and that's where I sat, and I killed him. But that was something that always stuck with me, like find where they're there more than once. A good 5-year-old buck is gonna weigh, 160, 180 pounds, something like that, 6-year-old. So he's stepping 2.5 of my shoes. A huge deer stepping 3, and that's rare. So 2.5 to 2 3/4, I'm hunting him.
Back then, did you know anybody who lived in Florida who was targeting and killing mature bucks, especially on public land, consistently?
Probably about 2006 I did. There was an old man. He's not around anymore, but he marked trees, and some of his trees you can still see the marks and stuff on them. That was back before maps. And that's how he navigated the woods, and I still see some of his marks, but he would take guys in. A lot of times in archery season, they would shoot 10 registry bucks a season. In some places, most guys wouldn't even walk in nasty swamps.
Interesting.
He motivated me, when I was like, if he can do it, I can do it.
Would you say he was like almost partly a mentor for you when it came to that kind of stuff, or did you have any other
not like he never took me or anything. It was strictly just listening to his stories and just taking like he would find a group. He liked to find like groups of bucks, so he would find an area that just because of the terrain, people either couldn't get dogs or couldn't access, or had been flooded for 10 years, whatever the situation was, to where there was a whole bunch of bucks in one area that were 4, 5, 6, 7 years old because of whatever reason, and that's where he hunted that year, and he would kill 10 of them. So I started kind of, that works.
Also, I'm guessing, especially when you met him, trail cameras weren't super well used back then, and they were pretty, they're nothing like it was today. So it was a lot more woodsmanship of him going in and finding the sign in order to try to find those bucks.
Yeah, I didn't have a trail camera till recently. Like, I never used trail cameras. Yeah, I'm behind the times.
Well, that probably makes you a better hunter.
Sure it does.
Would you say that?
Oh, I'm sure it does, yeah. Just having to read the sign, and a lot of times I didn't know. I would just know there's a big buck in the area. I wouldn't know what he looked like, but I wouldn't, and it's more exciting too.
Yeah. Yeah, man, you just mentioned that guy.
You don't know what to expect.
You mentioned that guy listening to his stories, and the first thing that came through my head, I was like, man, I bet he had some crazy stories hunting these swamps down here all the time, which I'm sure you do too, and I'm sure we're going to get into it. But so you started about 2006 trying to focus on killing bigger bucks.
Older deer, bigger deer. Yeah.
Bigger deer. How long did it take you to kind of get over the hump and actually start being successful?
First time. That wide one right there.
Really?
First time.
Oh, what's the story on that deer?
Went in archery season. Probably I don't remember the dates or anything, but early archery season, because it was hot, and hunted off the ground, and went in for a morning hunt, hunted off the ground, and I can't remember if I saw anything first. Anyway, like 11 o'clock. Wind had picked up. I start slipping. I like slipping, even archery. I like slipping. So I'm getting in the cabbage palm thickets and slipping around the edges and all that. And I came up to a little, almost like a dry pond, just a grass pond. And as I was slipping up there, I seen a top of a cypress tree doing this. I'm like, what in the world? I eased up there and looked, and there was 3 of them. And one of them was a lot bigger than that one, but I missed him and went back. But I knew they were there. Never saw that deer again either. He was probably 160-inch deer.
Whoa!
Yeah, and went back 2 mornings later or something and killed that one. He was one of the 3.
Dang, so you're getting on deer that big in central, like, would you call it Central Florida?
Yeah. They're getting to be. There's a lot of big deer around, but I don't think it's quite like it used to be as far as finding the places where there's 10 of them that because nobody goes there. Now we have these maps and everybody can find it. So that you don't find as many of those spots. So like I used to have those spots all over the place. So I know like for 3 years I'll go hunt here, here, and here, and then wait 5 years and I'll go hunt here, here, and here, and I could just keep doing circles. And now I can't. You know, there's people touch about everything now.
So, what was especially when you first got started, what did you need to see in order for you to have confidence that there was a mature buck in the area?
Mostly tracks, big tracks, and that's another thing. Going back to the dog hunting, I really learned to track from dog hunting. So a stride, that's something I look at. You know, here in Florida or Central Florida, a good 5-year-old buck is going to weigh, 160, 180 pounds, something like that. 6-year-old. So he's stepping 2.5 of my shoes. A huge deer stepping 3, and that's rare. So 2.5 to 2 3/4, I'm hunting him.
Okay. Now, also, what do you call a big track? Like, are you?
I don't care about size. I mean, I do. As far as size, you can look at some tracks that are just huge. Ooh, that's a big buck. But most of the time, I'm looking at the stride.
So the distance between the tracks.
Between tracks, yeah.
And that what size shoe do you wear?
These are 11s.
Okay, so
But most of the time, I'm like dog season. I wear boots, so I'm comparing it to boots that are a little bit bigger. But
okay.
So
they need to
two,
be
2
boot
3/4 of my shoe. Yeah, if he's stepping 2 3/4 of my shoes, he's at least over 3.5 years old.
How are you?
Ooh, interesting.
Yeah, we're going to talk more about this because I'm interested in this. Also, how did you determine if it's a walking track stride versus a trotting versus, of course, running or anything like that? How would you explain that to people?
If you're looking in dirt, you would see if the dirt was rolled up, or if his toes are spread apart. It's obviously not just a walking; he's jogging or doing something. So I want to see the walking track. If I'm looking at a running track, then I'm strictly going by size and length, but that's hard to do.
When it comes to tracks, I'm guessing maybe you can tell us from like a scouting standpoint. Let's talk about that. How did you scout back then in order to find those tracks? Like, what were you? Not necessarily what you were looking for, but like, where were you typically finding tracks? And did you have a certain comfort zone of like how far you need to go in order to find where a buck's going to be laying at? Like, was it ever like super close to the road? Did you have to go beyond some things in order to find that kind of sign?
It depended on where I was hunting. If I was hunting a place that had a lot of dirt roads and easy to track, I would track out of the truck. Just get in the truck and drive, and find somewhere in that management area he's going to cross a road, and then I could backtrack him and kind of know where to look based off where he crossed that road. And now, even that's funny looking back now, where they crossed the road 20 years ago before we had maps. It's the same place they're crossing the road now, and it's on the topo line every single time. In other states, that probably means nothing. I don't know, but here they're crossing on the topo line. So I would find those. And after you do it a while, I just go look here. If there's a buck there, he crossed the road here. So I'll just go look here, and find the tracks and back them up. But if I was in a thicker area, not road, something like that with no roads, then I would look in hog rooting, walk the edge of cypress ponds, things like that. And then while I'm doing that, if I see a rub like this, there's one here.
Also, you talk about backtracking them. Is that something that you started out doing as well? And was that something that old timer was telling you about? Or
no, he never talked about backtracking. His big thing was getting inside the thickets with him.
Okay,
that was what he wanted to do.
So backtracking is something that you kind of started playing around with, I guess?
Yeah, probably coming from, I never really thought about it too much. It's just something I started doing, probably coming from the dog hunting. Because I kind of know how a buck, some, depending on what phase of the rut or whatever, he may walk from dark to daylight. So just that ground he covers and kind of where he's at based, when I find his track, what terrain he wants to bed in, and then if I do, say I locate a certain buck, then I kind of know he likes bedding in this terrain. Then he might have 5 places like that around. I can kind of find each one of his beds. If that makes sense.
Yeah, no, it does. So back then you'd cut a big track and you would instantly try to backtrack, as in going back the way he was coming.
And if I couldn't see the track, a lot of times you can because it's mud, or you kind of just know his general direction he came from, and keep hitting cypress pond edges or something until you picked it back up. and and I remember I think it was, I was 14 years old. I backtracked one, one of my best bucks at a young, before I was big buck hunting, but I'd backtracked him and I found what he had done was made a rub line, and I come to find out he was doing it every 3 days. He was making a loop, but I found where his tracks crossed in like 3 places, and that's where I sat, and I killed him. But that was something that always stuck with me, like find where they're there more than once.
Okay. Now, also, kind of with the tracks and backtracking, you're talking about like trying to figure out maybe like a bedding area or like some kind of habitat or terrain that they want to bed in. Can you talk about different examples of bedding areas or habitat or terrain that you've seen bucks bed in and around across Florida?
I mean, it varies a lot through the state. You get up in, say, like the Ocala area where there's a lot of scrub and rolling hills and all that. They'll use the hillsides just like they do in hill country, Tennessee, Alabama. It's not really any different there. The only difference is a lot of the management areas have flag ponds and stuff like that in them, and they'll lay on the edge of that water, especially in dog hunting management areas, for that safety. To be a lot of our pretty much all of our management areas have controlled burns, and if it's a wet year, that burn doesn't make it all the way to the opening of the pond, so the edge is real thick, and they'll lay right in that little strip of thick up next to the water, with the wind coming off the hill. Water at their, bedded up next to the water, and then like. If you're talking about cypress ponds, like pines and cypress ponds and things like that, they'll go belly deep out in the water and lay at a dry spot at the base of a tree, and that's the most common here. But when they start doing that, then it's hard to narrow down beds. Like an older buck, he might have, well, he could have as many beds as he wants, but he may have 5 or 6 beds in one pond or in each pond. But a lot of times he'll have a pond he prefers, and it'll be a big old nasty pond.
Yeah, I get, my mind just keeps going back to the cover aspect again. Keep bringing it back to this old timer you mentioned. You were saying he likes to get in the thickets with him, and I just immediately was like, "What thicket?" Because I've been walking around out here.
It's all thicket.
Oh, dude.
No, he hunted areas with a lot of juniper trees and tie-dye trees. Do y'all know what that is? Tupelo honey.
Oh yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
it's tie-dye. It's just a tangle. So he would basically crawl in or cut him a little trail in or whatever he had to do. But he would get in there on them almost islands inside the swamp of just that tangle and find him just enough opening to shoot. Strictly archery hunting. Find him just enough opening to shoot, and that's where he would kill him. Because they're moving around in that stuff all day.
Sounds like Glenn Solomon.
Sounds like a couple of guys.
Yeah, well, we interviewed a gentleman from South Georgia years ago, and he was talking about hunting tie-tie bays. I don't know what a tie-tie is, but it sounded nasty.
Thick and nasty.
Interesting, man. That's like, and by the way, with the tracking, I can see how that could work. Again, walking around in some of these swamps, like we haven't been on a ton of areas in Florida, but the ones that we have walked around in, when you get into some of those swamps, especially when they're dry.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Yeah, you can follow
like
a
this,
track.
You can really track because there's nothing but mud.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then the size. I never found a big track today, like walking around, but I found some decent sized tracks. I mean, I don't know what a big track is down here, but that was, you kind of answered it earlier. But you were saying like a big mature buck, 180 pounds.
Yeah, where you were today, a big mature buck's comparable to your home state.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty much what it is in Alabama. About 180 pound deer, that's a pretty good deer. A 200 pound deer where we're from, Central Alabama, is a big buck.
Yeah, I haven't personally, but me and my brothers, we've only killed 2 or 3 over 200 pounds in our lifetime. So.
Yeah, Florida has kind of a reputation for, not being a big buck state. But the more guys that we talk to, like yourself, kind of throw that for a loop a little bit. And actually, being around Florida, it's so lush. Like, there's so much vegetation. There's so much thick cover. I'm like, there's got to be some pretty decent deer down here.
Yeah, especially when you get into, like, river bottom where there's nutrients.